Yep, that's fine.
Amazing. So let me do a little bit of housekeeping for you. As you can see, I am a real person. It's not a scam. Just to fill you in on how we'll work together for the next 8 weeks. So you've sent me a paper. We'll talk about that in a minute. The way that I work with people one-on-one is that you'll have a WhatsApp message opened up every Tuesday. You'll have access to me in WhatsApp to ask me questions in between our calls. You can also send me emails and stuff in between our calls. We'll have 3 calls. This is the first of 3. During those calls, you can use them for whatever you want. I think gathering from what you've sent me, we want to talk about Lola's EHCP and the recent review. The conversations we have are confidential. I won't share any of this with anyone else, with the exception of if something comes to light that I would suggest to me that either of you are money laundering or that a child or young person is in clear and immediate danger, and that would trigger my safeguarding policy, which is to discuss with my safeguarding lead, and then we would take that from wherever we needed to. The conversations we have is based on the understanding that I'm not a trained solicitor, nor am I a medical professional. Is that okay?
Yes.
Yep. Amazing. Good. Okay, so I've got your paperwork through, right? You sent me quite a few bits, so thank you very much. That was amazing. I've had a look. I've spent the past hour or so looking over it in some detail. From what I understand, just tell me if I'm right here. You've recently had a review of Lola's EHCP. She's not been in school for 12 months. The feeling from you and from other people involved with her is that mainstream is not suitable, if indeed setting is suitable at all for her currently. She's struggling to engage. Her PDA is challenging for her and for you. And we're at the stage where we've just had the review, and now we've got to think about how do we amend the plan for going forward with a view to EOTAS. Is that where we're at?
We postponed.
No, you carry on, Jodie.
I told Reese to do the talking because I've got Lola in the room, and then I've bumped in. We postponed the review, so it hasn't happened yet. We've postponed that to the 10th of November.
Review paperwork, but you haven't yet had the meeting. Okay.
Yes.
Brilliant. Okay, perfect. And what else did I want to just ask before we got stuck in? I think that's kind of what I wanted to make sure I was on the right page with. What I've done for you this morning, just to give you a heads up of what prep I've done. I've been through her plan. I've been through all the paperwork you provided. I've done a summary, as I understand it, of some of the things that are kind of glaringly obvious in the plan, and I can send that to you with regards to things like what you'd highlighted, that it points to a setting and the things that need to be looked at if she's not going to be in a setting. The things around specification and quantification. And I've also picked out any contradictions in the plan in terms of her needs being identified and then being contradicted. But actually, I can see that you've done a lot of work on it. I can see that you've made amendments. I can see that there's reading plans. You can often tell if a parent has been able to influence the content, and I can see that you've done some work there. So it's not in a terrible place, if that is of any consolation to you. From, in my professional opinion, it's not the worst plan I've ever seen by any stretch of the imagination. So I guess what I wanted to get from you today is a feel of what you want to achieve over our time together more generally, and also what you want to get out of today's call. Have you had a thought about that?
Should I go, Jodie?
Yeah, you go.
Okay, so from my understanding, leading into this, Heidi, that we've been part of your EHCP review webinar, sorry, that was done earlier in the year, and in there, I think quite early on, you make mention of when you have an EHCP review, you need to make a decision about where you want what you want your outcome to be. Both Jodie and I agree that the current situation can't continue. Jodie is very strongly EOTAS. Of our current situation, it's EOTAS, and I agree with that. I guess my goal would probably be an agreement to reassess needs. So we're both in the same ballpark. Jodie's a little bit further on than I am in terms of that. What we would like to get to the position to is, last year at Lola's EHCP, we've been quite lucky in the process of gaining an EHCP, although Jodie may not agree overly. Previous SENCO at school wasn't receptive, so we had to self-refer. But the self-referral and then getting an EHCP actually only took us 2-3 months if you take out the school break. We didn't have to fight. We didn't. It was pretty much, yeah, we agree, rubber stamped and through. So we felt quite happy at that point. Lola was in, Jodie would say, autistic burnout at that particular point in time. So we kept her. We didn't push her to do much. We reduced a lot of demands, and we've changed our own parenting style. One of the things that we were talking about at the time of the EHC plan being delivered was that Lola would try and attend school for maybe an hour a week or something towards the end of the day to try and reconnect her back into mainstream school. That didn't work out. And then really from January, what should have happened is me and Jodie should have is try to push the agenda further, saying this isn't working, we need to go further. However, we were in burnout as well. And Jodie would Jodie being the primary person in terms of taking Lola to school and stuff like that, found it very challenging. So we didn't push, and we kept our heads under the radar. When things started to look a bit bad towards the end of the summer term of this year, we started making comments about maybe we should be looking to do an emergency EHCP review. And then when we've come to do the actual review, we are now trying to fight for what we want. So we're in a place of, we want to change the plan. We need to see something that is benefiting Lola, because nothing has happened over the last 12 months. We postponed the meeting because it would be better for us to speak with you to advise us on the plan where we could be improving, what we could be asking for, and I guess maybe a little bit of what would you say? A little bit of confidence in saying, yeah, fight. Jodie, anything further?
Yeah, I agree. I think we know it's going to be a fight. We had a brief meeting with the new EHCP coordinator, and she was a battle axe who tried to guilt us into, oh, you need to think of her future. She won't be able to take exams and things like that. Told us we couldn't have any autis without us even applying for one. So we know we'll have a fight on our hands. And I think, yeah, it's kind of a bit of reassurance if you think that's the right way. And then just, I think we're struggling to see what we think actually will work for her as well, because we can't get her to do anything. And it's kind of, oh, we could fight for a tutor, but is that going to work? We could fight for this, but it's.
Yeah, of course. It's interesting. Just to give you a little bit of extra level of information about me, I grew up in Carlisle, so I'm familiar with the area-ish, although I'm not familiar with the current provision. So, but you're in Rockcliffe, right?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Cool. As I understand it, from last time I looked at Cumbria generally, but Carlisle more specifically, there's not a lot of specialist provision, is there?
No, we went to look at a school in Wigton that has a specialist provision for autism. And to be honest, it would have been great, but we can't get Lola to a park half the time or a swimming, we can't get her out the house. So realistically, even though I did like it, I don't actually think we could get her there either.
Yeah. Okay. And what age will she be next birthday?
9.
Right. Okay. So she's top end of primary, yeah? Or heading into top end of primary. Yeah. And when was the last time you had any educational psychology input?
It would have been at the point of the EHCP being drafted the first time, so September 22.
Okay. So over 12 months ago.
Yes.
And do you feel that, I mean, I am aware that I can tell from your paperwork and from the way that you're speaking that Lola is really struggling to engage with adults at the moment, but did you get anything useful out of that? Do you feel like, did they get a feel for what was going on for you as a family? And
I would say that the person that did the review was empathetic towards us. Every item that you see in the EHCP plan was what was provided by the Ed Psych.
Okay.
And she is, we don't have direct contact. It seems to be more supporting the school, and because obviously there's not attending school, there isn't that, we're not getting additional support on top of that, or we're not seeing any support as parents in that regard. So we've had nothing further. When I think you might have seen that there's been references to a company called Nudge.
Nudge. Yeah, that was going to be what I was going to ask you to dig into next. Go ahead, Reese.
So Jodie came to the group. I tell you, let me step back a little bit. A lot of conversations that we've been having with school have been funneled through social services, using child in need meetings from social services. So when we've been speaking, it's been in that regard. So Jodie had presented the idea of using Nudge. We met with somebody from Nudge. Social services worker had previously worked with Nudge and had a high recommendation for them. And it was school were budget conscious, whereas the ed psych was, don't worry, let's not worry about the money. Let's try and see if we can get something to stick. So she was supportive of getting Nudge in as well. But outside of that September assessment and that supportive of Nudge, we haven't had much from the ed psych.
Okay. And how, because I can see on paper that you've got someone engaged through Nudge, and she's got, you know, she's got some things to say about her relationship with Lola. What's your assessment of that relationship, both in terms of that individual and your relationship with Nudge, and how that's working at the moment?
Rather amusingly, the lady that Ruth that was supporting Lola through Nudge has had to take some time off work. We suspect for health reasons. So currently Nudge are reassessing who they can have come and start the process all over again with Lola.
Right.
So in speaking on behalf of Jodie, it's we probably shouldn't know how much they cost, but we do know how much they cost because of schools' concerns around it. And Jodie feels it's a lot of money for not much. But I'm of the tact of there's nothing else like it. You know, no, even if we didn't have that, there's no other alternative being provided that we think of that would provide somebody coming to see Lola in the home.
Yeah.
And trying to work with her. And there have been a lot of positives, in my view, of that relationship with Nudge. But I know there's a lot of training around autism and the supporting of autism and stuff like that, to which this person has. However, Lola was the first time they've ever met somebody that with a demand avoidant profile. And as we all know, that's sort of a lot of it goes out of the window, and it's much more about novelty and stuff like that. And some days can go fantastically well and others not so well.
Yeah, it was really interesting when I was reading Ruth's report, when she said she's the first young person that I've met with PDA. First of all, I thought, well, that's not true. You just didn't know it. But then I thought, when she was saying about, you know, so I have difficulty, it's difficult for me to plan things. I thought that's the kind of stuff that when you've got that knowledge of PDA, you would know that that requires a completely different approach, because you can't plan things for PDAs, especially when they're highly dysregulated and when they're in burnout. They need to have absolute autonomy. So I'm sure you know that, but it was something that I picked up in her notes, and I was going to say to you, when we're thinking about going forward, if you're thinking about someone to work in that way with Lola, one of the things I'd be keen to consider is how do we evidence the need for that to be trauma informed and PDA informed, and how do we evidence that that is required for her? I know that people have said that, but it might be that we need to tie that down a little tighter, because I think that's going to be key. You know, like we know that with PDAs, it's relationship first. So it kind of doesn't really matter what they're doing. It's about whether the young person trusts them or not. And being trustworthy to a PDA means that you don't try to trick them, and you don't try to tell them what to do. You'll know this. And that you honor their autonomy and their and scratch out any of that hierarchy stuff, which is, you know, really embedded in the traditional schooling system and in most systems, actually. Because I noticed in her EHCP, it says something about she's not able to adjust the way she communicates when she's talking to the head. And I was like, well, she won't be able to. She's a PDA, or it doesn't make any difference to her that they're the head at all. Like, it mean nothing. So, yeah, sorry, bit of a sidetrack. But yeah, I think that is something in there that I'd picked out when we were talking. So the relationship that you have currently with social care is that you have, is it 10 hours a week that you have funded through social care?
Yes.
And how's the relationship?
Say that again, sorry, Heidi.
How's that relationship?
that relationship is good. However, with right, okay.
You can speak freely. You don't need to think about. There's no one in the room that will be offended.
um, it started off very well because it was a friend that Jodie. It was a work colleagues of Jodie's wife, and they're trained in autism. And I think you might have actually seen her statement as well, Gemma. And there was a lot of enthusiasm to begin with, and there was a lot of work towards that. Unfortunately, Gemma has a child that has immune issues, so they've got a weakened immune system, so they're very susceptible to colds and stuff like that. And the plan was that she would go back to work doing this sort of work to enable her to pay for that child to go into nursery, and of course going into nursery, diseases, colds and all that sort of stuff. So he's been hit pretty hard, so there's been disruptions in there. That's having an effect on their personal lives. So recently Gemma is becoming tired. It's less, it's like I'm here, I'm present, and Lola wants to veg out and look at her tablet. That helps me recover and break from my own issues at home, sort of thing.
And she's pregnant.
And she's pregnant. So it will all start again very shortly.
Okay. All right. That lack of consistency for you in terms of the people that are supporting you, that is a big challenge at the moment, isn't it?
Yes, and it works both ways. I mean, we've both got family members that would be there in a heartbeat to support, but it's Lola. Lola can have it's hot and cold, and depending on what particular item happens during the session together, could mean that there has to be something avenged and disciplined and all that sort of stuff that makes it quite hard. For some reason, she really enjoyed my parents coming, and then I'm not sure what happened. It could be that a sandwich was delivered in the wrong way or buttered in the wrong way. But whatever happened, that's it. Lola's gone off the boil. So I'm now taking time off on Thursdays to cover what they would have done on a Thursday. So it's hard on both sides. It's hard for Lola. She needs that consistency and stuff like that. And then it's hard for the people to support her, because the best will in the world, you can say stuff till you're blue in the face, but a lot of people are going to come in with their preconceived notions and ideas, and it will make it, and then they run up against the brick wall that is Lola's personality. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. And what about the two of you? If this isn't a personal question and you do not have to answer it, it's just to give me a feel, but do the two of you feel like you've got a handle on what works for her? Not all the time, kids are not that predictable, but do you feel that you're ahead of the curve in terms of other people that are involved, in terms of understanding what she needs and how she responds and what works for her?
I'm going to see if I can answer the question. Yes. However, unless we constantly keeping in touch with each other, trying to do our own self-care, and I know we listen to a lot of resources such as yourselves and items like that. Unless we keep on top of that, we sort of fall back, if you will. And then when we have an explosion or something like that, it can put us back unless we're quick to catch ourselves and go.
Right?
Yeah, when we first went through diagnosis, the end of last spring, I was having a very difficult time, and Jodie was at the top. She was top of the game, stuff like that. It swung. I think it would be fair to say the other direction. I'm here, Jodie's down here, but now recently with Lola's, with my parents and stuff like that, it's kind of like I feel like I'm here, but I know I'm not. And I'm missing the trick. I'm missing the environmental change that's helping change in Lola at the minute. I've missed that, and I can't get my finger back onto it. And I think because of that, I'm struggling, which then means it's harder on Jodie and stuff like that.
Yeah, 100%. You're describing what a lot of PDA parents experience, if that's any consolation to you. That's not to downplay your experience at all, but just to reassure you that nothing you're saying is new. It's all very common shared experience for PDA parents. Sorry, just give me 1 second. I'm getting oodles of messages and I'm just on a call. I'll need to call you back unless it's absolutely urgent.
Where are you?
I'm at home.
I'm at the house.
3:30.
What are you looking at?
3:30. I'll call you when I'm done. Love you. I apologize. We're supposed to be looking at a house at 3:30. He's gone at 1:30. He will not. He says, please tell them I'm sorry I swore.
We're used to it.
Yeah, what you're describing, that thing of, as parents, you not having the extra people to lean on has an impact on you being able to support each other and then in turn support Lola and then advocate for Lola. So I'm wondering, I mean, it's kind of like magic wand, blue sky. If we could have everything wanted, we might want to think about what that could look like, support for you two as well. So that you've got someone who knows their way around PDA, not me necessarily. In fact, not me. It's not something I do, but there are other people I could signpost you to who could support you so that whilst you're working out what strategies work in your home, you're not losing yourselves or each other. Okay, so just going back to the what you said about the annual review, and I can see you've got your notes prepped in advance, and the conversation about EOTAS versus continuing as you are now versus a reassessment of need. Do you feel like you need some clarification or to unpick some of that?
So in our conversation, Jodie made mention that we met with the new HCP coordinator. In our conversation with her, we had requested that she attend the meeting because we wanted to discuss EOTAS as an option. She couldn't attend the original meeting date, so said we should talk separately. When she made mention of EOTAS, she said, as much as position herself as a mouthpiece, she was just delivering the message, if you will. She said, they have said that you won't get an EOTAS because you're already under a mainstream setting and you're receiving alternate provision through Nudge. And when we said that we needed to look at things that would help Lola while she's not in school, because she's not receiving an education, even though Nudge is providing coming to the home and stuff like that, their goal isn't education ultimately, and they're not somebody managed by Ofsted and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But she said, if we wanted to get Mind Jam sessions through, you can do that through EHCP. You don't have to have EOTAS to be able to do that. She said, we said, what about having some one-to-one tutoring that came to the home? She said, you don't need to do EOTAS for that. Again, it's EHCP. So we disagreed, but agreed that, all right, fair enough, we'll play the game that you're presenting in front of us. So we will go to the EHCP meeting with, we're going to make every request that we would make under EOTAS under EHCP. And we still don't think that's right. We don't think that, and we think that we're going to get, well, actually, she's under school under an alternate provision, so you don't need X, Y, and Z. So I think after that call, we were pretty much resigned that we were going to tribunal. But I guess for us, we want to know, in our current position, do you feel that us playing the game is the right thing to do, or should we be just going, no, it's EOTAS. It has to be EOTAS. And when we come to it has to be EOTAS, it's then, how do we build that EOTAS? Because we've looked and we've talked to people and we've got particular ideas, but it's a new to us. It's an unknown. And somebody who's such as yourself, where you posted that, was it on the last Thursday? Jodie sent me a message saying, look, we've got this opportunity. I'm like, well, yes, this is the perfect time for us to learn something.
Good. Pressure, but I've really got to deliver here. That's fine. This is what I do. It's fine. So just to kind of and forgive me if some of this is repetition of what you already know. Okay, so the test for EOTAS is that the local authority would deem it inappropriate for her to be educated in a school or college setting. And the case law that underpins that says that if and I'll send this to you, Otter, make a note that one of the action points is for me to send Reese and Jodie the case law regarding attending a setting. It's just for my transcriber. The case law says that if she is not educated in a school, i.e. attending a school building, that school cannot be named in Section I of her plan. So the LA is suggesting to you that you stay on roll with a school, because what that would then mean that the LA would be able to delegate the responsibility for alternative provision to the school. But what you've already seen and what you've had experience of is that the school then are stuck between a rock and a hard place because they can't draw down the funding to give sufficient provision. So the danger, and it's about what we get in your plan ultimately, but the danger is that the LA say we're going to name a school, the school are going to be responsible for alternative provision, and then you're fighting because school do not have the funding to make that suitable alternative provision. And potentially you'll be back where potentially you are now in 12 months' time, because she isn't attending, there isn't enough provision to move her on, and you're going to have to go to appeal then. Potentially, that's not a given. I have seen it work where plans have named settings and settings have delivered a full EOTAS package. It always comes down to having full specification in Section F of your plan and school being willing to do that. Go ahead, Reese.
I was going to ask, in your experience, where you say you've seen that occurred, does, for want of a better way of putting it, does that require a Senko that's shit hot?
Yeah.
Right.
Have you got a shit hot Senko?
We've got a one who will basically do whatever we ask her to because she hasn't got a clue what she's doing.
Okay.
So she's easily manipulated. Like the notes from school are basically what we wrote for her. So that's good in a way, but she's very, very new to it all and doesn't know anything. So she kind of relies on us to tell her what to do.
That could work in your favour, because what you're going to be telling her to do is what's lawful. It could be tricky because there's every chance that school policy and LA policy will work against that. So
I would be concerned, although if it was within the responsibility of just the school, we could probably get away with it. But Rachel is scared of Val.
Me too.
who's Rachel? Who's Val?
Rachel's the Senko, sorry, and Val's the EHCP coordinator.
Right. Okay. What a very scary name Val is. We've got a Val in Wakefield and she's freaking brilliant, but she's the only decent Val I've ever met. I think she got all the good Val vibes, and every other person I've ever met called Val has been an absolute twat. So the other issue you've got is that potentially it's kicking it into the long grass, because ultimately alternative provision is always intended to get a child back into a setting. And the purpose of alternative provision or EOTAS or whatever we're going to call it in Lola's case is to help her through the period of burnout that she's probably still in, and support her into understanding her neurotype better and having a better understanding of her sensory system and the people around her being trained to be able to do that. And whilst you might get a bit of a bodge job through alternative provision, and it can be a good middle ground when you're on your way to securing EOTAS, ultimately it's not a long-term answer, because alternative provisions are always expected and tasked with delivering academic learning and or transitioning a child back into a setting. And as you're heading towards high school, that time will go very quickly. And I think there's something to be considered there, that you don't want to still be in this position as she's heading to high school and potentially still have the LA expecting that she goes into a mainstream high school with pretty minimal support and not much understanding of her neurotype. So I think there's something about future-proofing it for her as well. You might have seen that 70% of PDA kids aren't in school, and this is why. That's not to say she couldn't be. My PDA is back in mainstream, not without its challenges, but that was only after a period of 2 years out of school and a year of EOTAS, where we changed everything we did, and right down to how I handle communication with schools and stuff. So it's plugging the gap between now and what comes next, which ultimately is high school progression and what that might look like for her. So I think we've got to be realistic about the journey between here and there. I'm a speaking processor, by the way, so if some of this isn't making sense, I forgive me.
No, it does. Last year, we took a bit of support from a company called Owl Blue in the Workington area, and they've got us in touch with somebody called Jeff Evans, and he very kindly sat with us for an hour and gave us some advice. And one of the things he said was, you need to think long term. So we know, we're very conscious that long term is the thing that we need to care about. And Jodie has said multiple times that the really maths, English, and maybe science are probably the key things. Lola's very creative, and she has that as a very good outlet, and we try to encourage it where we can. But because of the neurotype we're working with, it's like, I can do it today, but maybe not for the next 10 months, and I'll come back to it.
Yeah.
So we try our very best to support those whims across, and she has the opportunity to do whatever she needs to do or wants to do.
Yeah.
And really, we want to reflect that in her ability to gain access to some education.
And that needs to be reflected more clearly in her plan, I think. I think one of the things that you highlighted was, regardless of where we're going, her plan currently is all based around her being in a classroom with other students. And even midterm, that's not looking likely, is it? How long have we had 12 months out of school now?
Yes.
And what's interesting, actually, and this is where the LA, I'm just going to say it, have probably manipulated it a little bit to their advantage, almost certainly, is that because school are making alternative provision, your absence record will be a little bit funny. So you'll have educated off-site recorded probably in Lola's attendance figures rather than authorised absences, which potentially blocks your route to alternative provision as well. Sorry, go on, Reese.
Lola's actually, when she is not attending school, she is marked down as code Y, I think it is, the one that says she's in prison. I think it's that one.
Extreme circumstance or something. Or...
No, I'm sure it's they're in custody at that particular, but it's something to do with custody, or they can't walk to school.
Yeah, is the code Y the? You're asking me now. I always just push for I. Hang on a second.
But yeah, her attendance figures for last year is shockingly low. However, it looks much higher because they're only taking into consideration 4 weeks of the first 4 weeks of the year.
Yeah, of course. And also that works against you, because on paper you won't be flagged for particular types of support. You won't be flagged for full-time suitable alternative provision. Is there a reason why school aren't marking it as code I for illness? Have you had that conversation?
No, we haven't. And I you've said it in your previous advice in the webinar, but we go back to our, because there wasn't the additional absences, it wasn't reflecting badly. We weren't getting the pestering from school or from stuff like that. So we were like, we're under the radar. So
we didn't push it, did we?
Yeah,
no, we didn't.
And it is about, you've got to, like, all of this is information, and you've got to ultimately you've got to make the right decision for you and your family. And although guidance is clear, law is clear, procedure is clear, none of that really should be the determining factor about the decisions you make. It should be about what's right for you. Does Lola have siblings?
Just a 24-year-old brother.
Okay, so not another child living at home.
No,
Okay, all right.
thank
Cool.
goodness.
I mean, phew. Because the illness thing. So if her absences were being recorded under Code I for illness, and that was equivalent to 15 days or more, which it would be, she would be entitled to suitable full-time alternative provision, and the LA would have to fund that. So because she is not being recorded under Code I for illness, that's probably why school are not able to draw down the funding they need for the alternative provision. That could be a in-between step if we decide that we're going to pursue to tribunal. I say we, I mean you. If you decide you're going to pursue to tribunal, having those absences recorded under Code I for illness would unlock that piece of legislation. It's section 61 of the Education Act. I'll check. Or to check which section of the Education Act 15 days absence applies to, and send it to Reese and Jodie. Then you would be able to lodge a formal complaint with the local authority about failure to make suitable full-time alternative provision whilst you were going through the tribunal process. That might mean you could unlock things like Mind Jam, more nudge hours, maybe some mentoring, maybe some, I know that you've seen that there's trampolining and swimming and that kind of stuff in there. So that could be an option as a what you do in the meantime, if you think that ultimately tribunal is going to be the route you're going to need to go down. Did you say that you're getting some new advice from an occupational therapist?
We did. We had a therapeutic occupational therapist meet Lola last week for around half an hour, an hour.
An hour.
And she provided us with a report that we received late last night.
Cool. So we can have a
so we'll forward that one on, but a lot of it was about how Lola reacted and how direct connection. There's a lot of further supporting evidence about not having a direct line of communication, Lola not respecting that she's an adult, she's etc. And then a lot of stuff about helping with movement so that she can work on what's the word? Interoception. So things around that is mainly what the report reads as. And there is a line towards the end or somewhere in the middle that says, doesn't seem reasonable to send her into a mainstream school.
Okay.
Or words to that effect.
Okay. So you've got good evidence from lots of professionals and experienced people around you supporting what you're saying. We don't currently have an educational psychologist supporting that.
What I've heard from Rachel Lysenko is that Deborah, the Ed Psych, does believe that this is a long-term process. However, we don't have anything specific. Is it worth going personally looking for privately? Is it would to look for an Ed Psych to help us in this regard?
I mean, it can be really valuable. It's also incredibly costly, and the waiting lists can be tricky. But it's certainly something to look into. The difficulty with LA commissioned and LA employed Ed Psychs generally, but particularly those who are employed or commissioned by the LA, is that their advice is always based on what should provision look like in a setting for this child or young person. And for children for whom a setting isn't appropriate, that can be really tricky. Sometimes an Ed Psych could advise on what a transition plan might look like. And if you're going to go to tribunal and the local authority are going to make the case that she should be in school, or that they believe it's not appropriate for her to have a OTAS, one of the things that I always recommend to parents is that you ask for the educational psychologist to provide a detailed transition plan that would identify all of what Lola would need to move her from where she is now to where she's being able to be back in school. And that isn't just exposure. That's, all of the things that are identified as her needs around understanding her neurotype and emotional regulation and probably sensory regulation. you know, things that are already pinned out in the plan about when she actually gets into school. The bit that's missing is, yeah, well, that's fine, but how do we actually get her there? You know, and we're not going to drag her by her ankles, and we're not going to expose her to further trauma by just putting her in a space and expecting her to get over it. So sometimes, often in tribunal, if you've had a child that's been out of school for a long time, you can ask for their ed site to come as a witness and for them to submit something that would be a detailed transition plan. And that would need to be extended for a child like Lola, and it would need to be reviewed really regularly. But again, that's all part of the case for Hewitsons, that meanwhile she can't be in a setting, because if she could be, she would be. Have you had a sensory assessment?
No, not yet.
Okay. The short answer to that question is I'd look into independent ed psychs. Did I see that you've been refused referral to CAMS?
Yep.
Yeah, I've tried again, so I'm waiting to hear back.
On what grounds?
They said they don't deal with, I think it was autism. It wasn't mental health, if it was neurological or something.
Yeah, I hear.
But I was then told that you can only get a therapeutic occupational therapist through CAMS. So we ended up paying for one, because the occupational therapy that we can access ourselves as such is just on physical movements and things like that.
Well, I won't try and second guess what's in your report, but it'd be interesting to have a look at what your OT report has in it and what recommendations she's made.
She's also happy for us to make any changes or suggestions as this one.
Brilliant. As well, so. Okay, perfect. And with regards to school and the very compliant Senko, what does school have in terms of access to an ed psych? Do they have regular hours, or do they have to request it through the LA, or do you not know?
I believe they have a collection of hours that are spread across the year. Because Deborah was attending our child in need meetings on the social services. However, she's forewarned Rachel, and Rachel's told us that she won't be as involved as she was in the past regarding those, because it uses up the hours for Rockcliffe School.
Yeah, which is the challenge. Are Rockcliffe of the opinion that they can't meet need? Have you had that conversation?
The statement is we can meet need if she's in school. When we talk about Wigton School, they had very much breakout rooms, so that, you know, if a child was in the mainstream mood at that particular day, they could join the class, and if not, there was an immediate room where they could go and break out into. Rockcliffe doesn't have that capacity. It's a small village school, and we made that decision at the particular time because it's what we wanted for Lola. We thought a small village school would work out really well, and that we didn't want to put her into a big school, which has its benefits at the time of that decision making, but then it gives us our problems here on the flip side when we're looking for levels of support.
Yeah, that's the challenge we had. To be honest with you, you did the right thing by her, going with your gut and thinking she needs a small setting, she needs a small school where she's not going to get lost, where people know who she is. Part of the reason why my son Theo did as well as he did until he hit high school was because that's exactly what we had. And I didn't know that that's what he needed beyond just a bit of a gut feeling. But, you know, if it's any reassurance to you, I would say you've almost certainly saved a significant trauma by her being in a small village setting. So although it might not feel like the right decision now, I'm pretty confident that I could say to you, I think it was probably the right decision at the time, and you've done right by her to date. And it's just that as she's got older, her needs have developed, her presentation's changed, she's getting a bit older. She's also exposed to more things, and her tolerance level will be reduced because she's been masking. So, and now she needs something different. I think the challenge is, if Rockcliffe are saying they can meet need, did I see something about, I'm sure I saw, because it was in the summary, about a separate space. So there isn't a breakout space or a sensory space or a quiet space?
They have a room that they refer to as the blue room, which is a small room with a blue couch in it. Oh dear. She
You can say hello if he wants me to. Don't have to
she
though.
She can't hear.
she
Fine.
we could what we it was a suggestion made by the ed psych that we could take Lola into it. But she didn't. But schools sort of changed the parameters around that very quickly.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, the blue room, as it was called, they use it for phonics, so they couldn't guarantee that we could use it.
Okay.
All right.
Just having some PDA communication. Don't worry. He is so much like my Theo.
Right.
Okay.
I think you've hit your time limit, Jodie.
She's fine. Just carry on. Ignore.
Got a time limit on the amount that she's allowed to speak. Oh, you can get by Lola. I see. Okay, cool. Because the other thing that might be worth considering, I'm going to follow this up with an email anyway, with some stuff for you to think about. And none of it is me telling you what to think or do. I'm just going to give you some stuff to think about, and then you'll probably have more questions, which you can bring to the WhatsApp. That's fine, or whatever suits you. But it might be worth speaking to school about, given that the EP's involvement is going to reduce, can we have some EP advice about what a transition plan would look like, over what period, what would be required in terms of support for Lola during that period, given that everyone's in agreement that she can't be in school currently. And it might even be worth asking for the EP to, well, it would be a good idea to ask the EP to give you some time to talk to the EP about it and see whether you can actually have them recommend that currently it's not appropriate for her to be in school, and that the plan needs to reflect that, and make some recommendations around what could be included, because I think that's the bit that we're missing. Is the stuff in section F is, like we've already said, what's going to move her back to, not even to being able to be in school, just what's going to give you some choices, really, beyond being told that if she's in school we can do it. The fact is she isn't in school, and if they could meet needs, she would be. So, and that would, you know, if you need to go to tribunal, I think you've got tons of good evidence there around that. But I am conscious that you want to think about what's in Lola's best interest in the meantime. Oh no, she's gonna outdo me with cuddly toys. Hold on. Here we go.
Here you go, Lola, look at this.
Mine's a giraffe. He looks like he's got a big boil on his neck though.
She's gone to get a bigger one now.
Oh, right, okay.
The battle is on.
It's set. Flipping it.
I know.
All right, I'll win. I'll win in a minute. You ready?
Oh.
I win.
Mhm.
He's
Oh,
not
no, you
happy.
Oh no, what does that mean?
He is not happy.
You're gonna have to find smudge, aren't you?
Have you got a cat?
Yeah.
Cat. Sorry. Okay, so clarifying questions for us, just coming towards the end of our call, because I know we started late, so I'm not in a rush to get off. But if I'm going to follow this up with something for you, what do you want me to make sure is the top line stuff that I address? I'll do you a summary and I'll send you some bits and some thoughts. But what have we talked about, or what have we not picked into properly? You want me to make sure that I detail in that email?
Just looking over my notes, I think one of the things we've, as you understand it, we should maybe put in a request to school to speak with the ed psych. Look at perhaps looking at an independent ed psych for ourselves, maybe, depending on how well that conversation goes with school. We need to have that conversation with school around Code I. I guess probably do we need to have, I know that we don't necessarily need to have a GP letter around that, but as I don't know who's the person responsible for saying code Y versus whatever. I guess
Ultimately, it's the head teacher's discretion whether they authorised absences and what code they use. It could be, given that they're using such an unusual code, I think they've had advice from someone at the local authority. Because it's not the kind of thing I would normally expect a primary head to know their way around. Oh, I can see that there's cat action happening. Oh my God, how cute. So you will have access to the marble run as part of this. Have you already got in there, Jodie?
Yeah, we had access when we joined the
Neuroclastic.
the neuro.
Curious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool, brill.
I think Reese is autistic and he thinks I am.
I mean, I'm not going to offer you any unsolicited advice, but let me know if you'd like my expert opinion.
Yeah, I do.
I would say you're almost certainly both one of ours. And you can take from that what you wish.
I was diagnosed BPD, so we think maybe
yeah.
I've got the PDA.
Yeah, we all get one of those on the way. We all get either a BPD or a manic depression or a depression anxiety or a whatever else it might fit. I mean, I always joke that the best way to assess autistic ADHD people would just be to bring them into a room with other ADHD and autistic people. We could just go one of ours, not one of ours. To be honest, neither of you could have stood this conversation with me if you weren't neurodivergent. Like, this would have driven you absolutely bonkers. So, I mean, it maybe has, and maybe you just
I've enjoyed it.
So, but yeah, I can send you some screening tools if you want. I've got a good couple of screeners that will give you an idea of.
Yeah, definitely.
I'll send them to you. I'll put them on the email. All the fun.
I think the other thing, going back to what the add-in was, you mentioned about getting support in place for me and Reese and Lola from I don't know what kind of support for her to get a better understanding of her neurotype and that kind of thing. So I would like to definitely delve into that, because at the minute I feel like me and Reese have done every course and he's read every book, but we haven't really got anything in place for Lola.
Yeah.
Including yours, Heidi, before you ask.
Yeah.
You know I wrote a book. So yes, I'll make a couple of recommendations. The one that springs immediately to mind is Raising a Wild Child. I don't know what capacity they've got at the moment, but Susan Iser at Raising a Wild Child is absolutely incredible. And I have had a couple of families who have got EOTAS packages with her as the lead professional, and she's excellent. So her background is she used to be a Senko, then she was a lead in a specialist resource provision. She's autistic ADHD PDA herself. She is nonviolent resistance communication trained, trauma informed. She worked with a family. The reason I know her is she worked with a family with two boys, quite different presentations, but both of them out of school. She's the only person I've ever seen be able to work with one of them in particular who was really struggling. And I always think that if children who are finding things super difficult trust an adult, that's a really good sign. So they're always, PDAs are a good barometer for me. If a PDA likes an adult, I'm like, oh yeah, safe. But yeah, the other thing, there was something I just thought of then. Code I in the marble run. I've just sent instructions over to Jodie to put a new section up on barriers to attendance. She's got it all. I imagine it'll be up by the end of the week. And in there is a template letter, requesting that absences be authorised under Code I. You might need to tweak it because they're obviously already being coded under something else. The letter says it's unauthorised, but you could tweak it. And there's also in there the template letter to request alternative provision if and when you need it. So you might find the stuff in that particular section is a little bit helpful. But I think in the meantime, what I need to do, if you could send me your OT report, I can have a look at that before we connect on WhatsApp on Tuesday. And I will send you, I've got your number, Jodie. I don't know if you want to both be in that WhatsApp chat, but what I do on Tuesdays is about 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, you'll get a WhatsApp message saying, I'm in your pocket today. And I'm usually around until about 6 o'clock. And so just message me on WhatsApp and say, we're checking this, we're not sure about that, we're not sure about the other, and I'll come back to you. I have admin days on Tuesday, so I don't have any calls. So although I'm doing other bits and I'm sometimes responding to other things, I know that I can always respond on WhatsApp on Tuesdays. So maybe we can dig into that a little bit more. Have you rescheduled your annual review meeting yet?
10th of November.
10th.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we've got a couple of weeks. I think the other thing that you might need to think about, and maybe I can send you some prompts for this, but have you watched the EOTAS 101 and the EOTAS How to Put Together a Package?
I haven't watched, I've seen 101, but I haven't watched that second one though.
Okay, so the one that is How to Put Together an EOTAS Package, I think you might find helpful. There's a template on there of like, well, when you watch the video, you'll see, hopefully, be as ambitious as you want, start big, and then we can always trim it down. And the way to think about it is we backwards engineer it. So think about what you would really like and what you think might suit Lola. You may not know, but ideas around interest-based stuff. And then we think about, right, okay, so how do we evidence this is what she needs. And I would probably recommend that we try and get another call in before your review meeting, if that feels good to you. But I'm not, you use the calls when you need to.
Yeah, I've got one booked in for the 8th of November, so like 2 days before.
Brilliant. Okay. And if in the meantime you want help with what you need to send in advance, and I think the big piece is going to be that package. If the LA is saying, oh, well, you can get it all through your HCP, then I would put in a request. I would put a package together and ask for that to be reflected in Section F. So that's going to be your big piece of work, I guess, between now and review, bearing in mind you should submit that 2 weeks before the review to be circulated to everybody. So really you've got about a week. No pressure. But, you know, they never meet deadlines, so don't put yourself under undue pressure there. Like, they'll get it when they get it. Does that give you some stuff? Did you have other stuff on your list, Reese, that was... No? Okay.
No, yes, I've got enough actions, I think, for now.
I'm sure you have. Not like you've got a job to hold down or anything, is it?
No.
You like a good list, don't you, Reese?
Fortunately.
Are you a put it on the list and it gets done person, or put it on the list and then lose the list person?
Oh, I don't lose the list. I have a time management system where I record it every single day. So I remind myself how far behind I am every day. Starts the day off quite well, Heidi.
I bet that's great for your self-esteem.
Yeah.
He hasn't got any.
God love you. Are you a list maker, Jodie?
Pardon?
Are you a
No.
list maker? Okay.
No. I'm
So
a fly by the seat of
and Reese is autistic.
yeah.
That's what we've basically established. And you've both got high levels of demand avoidance. That's all right. You know what we're working with. Okay. Has this been helpful?
Yes, very
Yes,
helpful.
I
Thank you.
appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. I appreciate that it was very stressful, me looking like a scammer, and I hope I don't look like a scammer any longer.
I didn't even tell Reese. I sent Heidi an email and it bounced back saying a domain was down. I thought, oh no, I fell for a scam, because it ticked all the boxes. It created that sense of urgency, and I was straight on to pay, and I thought, I've been scammed. And then I messaged Heidi on a different site. She said, no, the website is just down.
That domain is down because ADHD had forgotten to renew it. So, so what I'll do is I'll get you a summary over. It will be in the next 24 hours. I'll try and do it by the end of today, but it might not quite go to plan because I've got a training to deliver PDA Society tonight, so we'll see how it goes. But either way, I'll get you a summary over, and then if you send me either before or after, it doesn't matter, the OT report, but have a look at it first and maybe send it with some questions if you need some clarification on anything of it, and then we'll connect on Tuesday. Does that sound all right?
Yep.
Real. Thank you very much.
Amazing. Thanks for your time today. I will speak
Okay.
to you. Bye.
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 Thank you. Bye.